The snow-covered valley lay silent except for the distant hum of engines. Hidden inside a wrecked shuttle, a man adjusted the small earpiece in his ear. His name was Rian, a human spy working deep behind enemy lines. He had survived 3 months of dangerous infiltration, playing both sides while feeding information back to Earth Command. Every move he made could mean life or death. Rian's current assignment was supposed to be simple. Gain the trust of the Kazin faction, pretend loyalty, and pass their secrets to the rival Torvian alliance. But nothing in this frozen war zone stayed simple for long. The Karzan leader's daughter, a woman feared for her cunning as much as her beauty, had summoned him in secret. No one else knew why. He couldn't refuse, but he also couldn't trust her. He stepped out into the cold wind. Snow whipped across his face as he made his way toward the rendezvous point. His boots crunched on the icy ground while shadows shifted in the jagged cliffs above. Every sound carried too far in the thin air. He knew the Torvian scouts were near. He also knew the Karzan guards watched from hidden positions. In this valley, one wrong word could mark him as a traitor to both sides. When he reached the narrow pass, he saw her. Commander Jaren's daughter stood alone, crimson armor gleaming against the white snow. Her silver hair flowed in the wind, and her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. She didn't look afraid. Instead, she looked like someone who had already calculated the next 5 moves in a game only she understood. "Are late," she said, her voice calm yet edged with command. Rian bowed slightly, careful to keep his movements controlled. "Snow slowed me," he replied. She stepped closer, her gaze sharp. "Or perhaps you stopped to speak to someone you shouldn't have." The accusation was there, but her tone suggested curiosity more than anger. It was a dangerous kind of curiosity. He wanted to test her, to see if she knew anything about his true role. "If I had, would you tell your father?" he asked. A faint smile touched her lips. "If I told my father everything, you would not be standing here now." Her answer sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This meeting was no casual conversation. She was probing for weaknesses, perhaps even planning her own betrayal. From behind them, the sound of movement echoed in the pass. Rian tensed, but she did not turn. "They won't interfere," she said softly. "This is between us." Her words carried a weight that made Rian realize she had dismissed her own guards for this meeting. That meant either she trusted him more than she should, or she was confident she could kill him herself if things went wrong. "I have a proposal," she continued. "One that could change the course of this war." Rian's instincts screamed at him to walk away, yet he stayed. "Why me?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Because you are the only one clever enough to survive both my father and his enemies. And because I know you are not loyal to either side." The words cut straight through his careful mask of deception. For a moment, neither spoke. The snow fell harder, cloaking the valley in a shifting curtain of white. Rian felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. If she truly knew his secret, she could expose him at any moment. If she didn't, then she was making a gamble that could destroy them both. Either way, the next step he took would lead him deeper into danger than ever before. Finally, she extended her hand. "Join me," she said. "Not as a soldier, not as a spy, but as a player in a game only we can win." Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with something between ambition and challenge. Rian took a slow breath, knowing that whatever he decided in this moment would change the fate of more than just himself. Rian did not take her hand immediately. The snow swirled between them, as if the valley itself was listening to their words. His instincts told him that this was a trap, yet there was something in her eyes that pulled him in. She was dangerous, but danger was the air he had breathed for months now. "What game are you playing?" he asked. She let her hand fall, but her smile did not fade. "A game of survival," she replied. "For me, For you, and for anyone clever enough to take the right side at the right moment. Her voice was smooth, but each word carried a hidden edge that made him uneasy. She began to walk deeper into the pass, her long cloak leaving streaks of red against the white snow. Rian followed, his senses alert for hidden threats. The cliffs on either side seemed to close in, and the faint glow of distant fires marked the camps of both factions. This was a place where neutral ground did not exist. Every step could be a step toward betrayal. When they reached a ridge overlooking the frozen river, she stopped. "From here," she said, "you can see the truth of this war." Below them, figures moved in the snow. Torvian scouts in black armor, their weapons ready. On the opposite bank, Karzin warriors crouched in defensive lines. The river was the only barrier keeping them from each other. A single shot could set the valley ablaze. Rian studied the scene, knowing that both sides would see him as an enemy if he was spotted here. "Why bring me to this?" he asked. She turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly in the fading light. "Because I know you can cross that river without being killed. And because I know you have something they both want." Her words pressed against him like the weight of the cold wind. He chose his next words carefully. "You think I can end this war?" She tilted her head. "No," she said. "I think you can win it. But only if you play with me." There was no hesitation in her tone. She spoke as if the outcome had already been decided. That confidence was as unnerving as it was tempting. A faint sound carried on the wind, the snap of a twig, the shifting of snow. Rian's hand went to the weapon at his side, but she raised her hand in warning. "Not yet," she said softly. "They are only watching." He scanned the shadows, catching glimpses of movement in both directions. Whoever was out there, they were waiting for something. The air felt charged, as if the first shot of a battle was moments away. She stepped closer, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "If you agree, I will give you information that neither side has. But in return, you will act when I say. No questions, no hesitation." Rian searched her face for any sign of deceit, but all he found was determination. He realized then that she was not offering him safety. She was offering him a path into the heart of the storm. "You're asking me to betray both factions," he said. Her smile widened just slightly. "I am asking you to survive," she answered. "And to ensure that when this war ends, the survivors are the ones who deserve to live." The way she said it made him wonder if she counted herself among those survivors, or if she was ready to sacrifice everything for a cause he did not yet understand. Rian's breath fogged in the air as he weighed the choice. Trust her, and he could gain power neither side expected him to have. Refuse her, and he might not live to see another sunrise. The snow began to fall harder, cloaking the valley in white as the sounds of the river faded beneath the wind. Finally he nodded once. "I'll hear your plan," he said. She studied his face for a long moment after his answer. Then she turned toward the ridge again, watching the shadowed shapes below. "Good," she said finally. "Because this plan cannot wait." The tone of her voice told him that his agreement had already locked him into something he could not easily escape. Rian stayed silent as she began to outline her idea. She spoke quickly, her eyes never leaving the frozen river below. The Karzin forces were preparing to strike the Torvians within the next 2 days. At the same time, the Torvians planned to launch a counterattack from the opposite side. Both sides believed they held the advantage. Neither side knew they were walking into mutual destruction. "You will go to the Torvian camp tonight," she sighed. "You will tell them the Karzin intend to attack in the morning. They will shift their positions to prepare." Rian frowned, and then? She looked at him sharply. "Then you will return here and tell the Karzin the Torvians are advancing tonight. Both sides will move early. Both sides will meet in the middle before their traps are ready." Her eyes narrowed. "And both will lose more than they expect." Rian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. "You want to force them into chaos," he said. "I want to give them no choice but to negotiate," she replied. "When both factions are too broken to fight, the ones who remain will need a new path. That is where we will be waiting." Her words were smooth, but her gaze was sharp enough to cut through steel. He considered the danger. Moving between both camps in one night meant passing through guarded checkpoints and patrols. One mistake would end in a swift execution. "Why not send one of your own?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Because they would be caught. You, however, can wear the face of any side you choose." There was a strange note of trust in her voice, though he doubted it was real trust. From the ridge, a sharp whistle cut through the wind. She turned slightly, but did not seem alarmed. "That means our watchers have spotted movement," she said. Rian scanned the valley, spotting small flickers of motion along the tree line. Whoever was out there was closing in, but he could not tell if they were friend or foe. "We should move," he said quietly. She began walking back toward the narrow pass, her armor catching what little light filtered through the clouds. Rian followed closely, his hand near his weapon, but not drawing it yet. The path was slick, and the air seemed thicker with tension the further they went. The snow crunched beneath their boots like the ticking of a clock counting down to something unseen. Halfway through the pass, a shadow broke from the rocks ahead. A figure in dark Torvian armor stepped into their path, weapon raised. Rian froze, but she did not. "Stand down," she ordered, her voice cutting through the cold. The soldier hesitated, then lowered the weapon slightly. "Orders from the high camp," the soldier said. "The human comes with us." Rian's jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked toward him for the briefest moment before she faced the soldier again. "No," she said. "The human is under my command." "Now," the soldier shifted uneasily. "Those are not my orders." She stepped forward, close enough that her crimson armor nearly touched his black plates. "Then change them," she said. Something in her tone made the soldier take a step back without realizing it. The soldier finally nodded and stepped aside. She continued walking without looking back, and Rian followed. His mind raced with questions. Had she just saved him, or had she ensured that he stayed alive only because she needed him for her plan? Either way, he knew the night ahead would test every skill he had learned in his years of playing both sides. Asterisk. They walked in silence for several minutes. The only sound the wind dragging across the frozen cliffs. Rian's mind worked through the plan she had given him. Every step he took toward agreeing felt like a step into a deep, cold pool from which he might never rise. Still, he matched her pace, knowing that hesitation would only make him look weaker. In her eyes, when they reached the edge of the valley, she stopped and looked toward the distant horizon. A faint orange glow flickered far away, marking the Torvian campfires. "That is where you will go first," she said. "You will enter as one of their own, speak to their commander, and plant the seed I have given you." Her voice carried no doubt, only certainty that he could do it. Rian adjusted the scarf around his neck, shielding his face from the bitter wind. "And if they suspect me?" he asked. She turned, her silver hair catching the light. "Then you will do what you have always done. Talk fast, move faster, and never give them time to aim." The way she said it made it sound simple, though both of them knew it would be anything but. They began the descent down a narrow slope carved by centuries of ice. Rian kept one hand on the rock wall beside him, careful not to slip. The cold air stung his lungs, but he stayed focused. Each turn of the path revealed more of the snow-covered plain below, dotted with dark shapes that moved slowly in the distance. Patrols, always watching, always ready. Halfway down, she stopped again. "You will need a disguise," she said. Reaching into her pack, she pulled out a folded set of Torvian armor plates. "These belong to a scout who will not be returning." Her eyes met his, daring him to ask for details. He didn't. Instead, he took the armor and began strapping it over his clothes. feeling the cold metal settle against his body. When he was done, she inspected him with a critical eye. "Almost convincing," she said. Then she reached up and smeared a streak of dark ash across his cheek. "Better," she added. The gesture was oddly intimate, but her expression remained unreadable. Rian forced himself to focus on the task. Not the way her gaze lingered for a fraction longer than necessary. As they neared the base of the slope, a sudden crack echoed through the air. Rian dropped to one knee, scanning for the source. She stayed upright, her hand on her weapon butt. Her posture calm. "It's just the ice," she said. Still, he didn't relax. In his experience, calm moments often came right before the storm. He watched the ridgeline until the last shadow moved out of sight. They crossed the plain without speaking, each step sinking into the snow with a soft crunch. The Torvian camp loomed larger ahead, its perimeter marked by high barriers of metal and ice. Rian could see figures moving along the walls, their faces hidden behind black helmets. Every watchtower was armed, every entrance guarded. If he was going to survive this night, his act would have to be flawless. She stopped just short of the camp's outer edge. "From here, you go alone," she said. "If you succeed, I will see you before the second moon rises. If you fail, I will know." Her voice carried no threat, yet the implication was clear. This was his test, and she would not save him if he stumbled. He nodded once, tightening the straps of his armor. Then, without another word, he stepped forward into the glow of the Torvian campfires. The cold seemed to vanish, replaced by the heat of tension burning in his chest. Ahead, a guard spotted him and called out, his voice sharp against the night. Rian kept walking, his mind already forming the first lie he would tell before the night was over. The guard stepped forward, his weapon angled toward Rian. "Identify yourself," he demanded. Rian let his voice carry the confidence of someone who belonged here. "Scout from the eastern ridge, orders to report directly to Commander Varric." The guard's visor tilted slightly as if assessing him. After a pause, the weapon lowered just enough to let him pass. Inside the camp, the air was thick with the smell of burning fuel and heated metal. Torvian soldiers moved between tents and weapons racks, their armor clinking with every step. Rian kept his pace steady, forcing himself not to look at anything for too long. Too much interest could mark him as suspicious. Too little could make him seem lost. He found the command tent near the center of the camp. Two heavily armed guards flanked the entrance. "Orders from the ridge," he said again, handing over a small encrypted chip. One guard took it and scanned it before giving a short nod. They stepped aside, and Rian pushed through the heavy curtain into the warmth of the tent. Commander Varric stood over a hollow map, his clawed fingers tracing the outlines of the frozen river. He was taller than most Torvians, his armor decorated with jagged lines of red paint. His eyes flicked up at Rian, sharp and assessing. "Report," he ordered. Rian stepped closer, careful not to betray any sign of hesitation. "Karzin. Forces are preparing to cross the river before dawn. They mean to strike here first." Varric's gaze hardened. "How do you know this?" he asked. Rian met his eyes without flinching. "I was on the ridge when their scouts passed the message. They are gathering siege weapons under cover of the snow. If you wait, you will be surrounded." The commander studied him for a moment longer, then turned back to the map, muttering orders to his aides. Rian's words had the desired effect. The commander began shifting troop positions on the map, pulling units from the southern line toward the river. Every movement would bring the Torvians closer to the Karzin before either side was ready. Rian kept his expression neutral, hiding the rush of relief that came with knowing the first part of the plan was working. "You will stay in the camp until further orders," Varric said without looking at him. That was not part of the plan. And Rian felt the tension rise in his chest. "I still have scouts to warn on the ridge," he replied. The commander's eyes narrowed. "They can wait." The words felt like a door closing. But Rian forced himself to nod calmly. When he stepped outside, the cold hit him again, sharp and biting. He needed a way out before the guards realized he had no intention of staying. Moving quickly, he slipped between the tents toward the supply area. Soldiers were busy loading crates onto sleds, their attention fixed on their tasks. He grabbed a fur-lined hood from a rack and pulled it low over his face. From the shadows, he watched the camp gates. The guards rotated every few minutes, leaving a narrow window where one man could slip out unnoticed. Rian timed his steps with the noise of a passing sled, moving into the gap without drawing a single glance. Beyond the gates, the dark plain stretched out toward the ridge where she would be waiting. The cold was worse here, without the fires of the camp to hold it back. Snow crunched under his boots as he moved quickly, keeping low and using the shadows for cover. The river was a black line ahead, frozen in parts, flowing in others. Somewhere beyond that line, the Karzin camp waited for him to deliver the other half of her plan. Rian kept moving, the wind cutting against his face like a blade. His breath came in steady bursts, each one forming a cloud that was quickly stolen by the cold air. The frozen river drew closer, its surface cracking faintly under the strain of the ice. He slowed as he approached, scanning both banks for movement. He crouched low near the edge, finding a narrow stretch where the ice looked thick enough to cross. The snow muffled his steps as he tested each patch carefully. Somewhere upstream, water rushed beneath the ice, whispering of the danger hidden below. He kept his balance, knowing that a single slip could end his mission before it began. The far bank was darker, shrouded by thick pine trees. Rian stepped into their shadows and paused, listening. He caught faint voices, low and clipped, the kind of tone soldiers used when patrolling. Adjusting his grip on the weapon at his side, he moved toward the sound, careful to keep his path hidden by the trees. 2 Karzin sentries appeared ahead, their armor glinting faintly in the dim light. Rian stepped out into view before they could react, raising one hand in a gesture of peace. "Scout from the northern range," he said quickly. "Urgent orders for your commander." The sentries exchanged a glance before one motioned for him to follow. Their suspicion was clear, but not enough to turn him away. They led him into the heart of the camp, where a large fire burned in the center, casting flickering shadows across rows of tents. Warriors moved in and out of the light, their faces painted with dark lines that marked their rank. The air smelled of smoke and heated metal. Rian kept his head slightly bowed, presenting himself as a messenger, not a threat. At the largest tent, the sentries halted and stepped aside. Inside, Commander Jaren sat on a low bench, her sharp features lit by the glow of a hanging lantern. She looked up as Rian entered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You bring news?" she asked. Rian nodded. "The Torvians are moving to strike tonight. They believe they can take the river before dawn." Her gaze sharpened, but she did not interrupt. "How do you know this?" she asked. "I crossed the northern ridge before nightfall," he answered. "Their scouts were gathering, their siege lines forming. If you move quickly, you can meet them on the river and crush their advance before they are ready." Each word was measured, carrying the urgency she needed to hear. Jaren stood, her long coat brushing the ground. "This could be our chance," she said, turning to one of her aides. Orders were given, voices rose, and the camp began to shift. With purpose. Warriors hurried to arm themselves, sleds were loaded with weapons, and the firelight caught on the steel of freshly drawn blades. The trap was almost ready to spring from both sides. Rian kept to the edge of the tent, watching carefully. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. If either side realized they had been pushed into this position, his life would be worth less than the snow under his feet. But so far, both factions believed they were acting on their own advantage, not walking into the other's reach. When Jaren turned back to him, her expression was almost approving. "You may have just changed the course of this war," she said. Rian forced a small nod, hiding the fact that the real architect was waiting on the other side of the river. He stepped back into the cold night, ready to vanish into the shadows before the fighting began. Rian moved swiftly through the dark tree line, retracing his steps toward the river. The night was alive with distant shouts and the faint clatter of weapons. Both armies were already on the move, their plans colliding in the shadows of the valley. Every sound carried the promise of violence, but also the proof that her plan was working. The ice groaned under his boots as he crossed the river again. He kept his eyes fixed ahead, where faint torchlight flickered in the distance. Reaching the far bank, he climbed the ridge, keeping low and using the rocks for cover. The cold bit into his fingers, but the urgency of the mission pushed him forward. She was waiting near the edge of the pass, her crimson armor faintly visible under the light of the twin moons. Her gaze locked on him the moment he emerged from the shadows. "It's done," he said. She nodded once, her expression unreadable. "Then we have only to watch," she replied. They climbed to a high overlook where the frozen valley stretched. Out below them, on one side, the Torvian forces were advancing in tight lines, their dark armor like a river of shadow across the snow. On the other, the Karzan warriors moved to meet them, their crimson banners fluttering in the wind. Between them lay the frozen river, the stage for a battle neither truly wanted. The first clash came with a sudden burst of light as a Torvian scout fired a flare into the sky. The flare's glow illuminated the Karzan charge, their warriors, moving fast and low, weapons ready. The two forces met in the middle, a chaos of steel and shouts. Rian felt the ground tremble under the weight of so many boots and sleds. From their vantage point, he could see the confusion take hold. Torvian formations broke as Karzan soldiers cut through their flanks. At the same time, the Torvian right wing pushed deep into the Karzan line, splitting their forces. Neither side had the advantage for long. Every gain was answered by a loss. Every push met with a counterstrike. She watched it all with a cold focus, her eyes tracking the movements. Like a strategist studying a game board. "They'll exhaust themselves," she said quietly. "And when they can no longer fight, we will step in." Rian glanced at her, wondering if she felt any guilt for orchestrating the slaughter below. Her face gave nothing away. The battle raged on, the air filling with the clang of weapons and the cries of the wounded. Snow turned dark where the fighting was thickest. Yet even in the chaos, Rian could see the truth. Both sides were weakening faster than they could recover. Supplies would run low, morale would break, and the war would lose its fire. He turned his gaze back to her. "When this ends, what then?" he asked. She kept watching the valley. "Then we choose who leads the survivors," she answered. "And we make sure no one can challenge them." The certainty in her tone was chilling, as if she had already mapped out every step beyond this night. As the fighting began to slow, the sounds of battle giving way to the groans of the injured, Rian felt the weight of what they had set in motion. Both factions would emerge from this night crippled, their leaders desperate for an answer to the ruin left behind. And standing in the shadows, ready to offer that answer, would be the two of them. The battlefield was silent now except for the wind sweeping across the snow. Broken weapons and abandoned banners lay scattered between the frozen banks. The Torvians had pulled back to their side, the Karzan to theirs, each too wounded to launch another attack. Smoke rose in thin streams from burned sleds, twisting into the pale light of dawn. Rian stood beside her on the ridge, watching the aftermath. The cold pressed against his skin, but his mind was fixed on the truth of what they had done. She had predicted this outcome perfectly. Both sides were alive, but both were too damaged to continue the war. For the first time in months, the valley was without the sound of marching soldiers. "They will send envoys before the next sunrise," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "And they will come looking for someone to speak for them." Rian looked at her, realizing she meant herself. She was already preparing to step into the role neither side would openly trust, but both would need. He shifted his stance, the snow crunching under his boots. "And what about me?" he asked. She turned her gaze on him. "You will be by my side," she replied. "They will see you as the neutral voice between factions, the man who moved in both camps without belonging to either." The idea was dangerous, but it was also the safest position he could hope for now. Below them, the first movements began. Small groups carried the wounded away. Fires were lit to warm the survivors. The air was no longer filled with the roar of battle, but the tension remained. Every soldier knew the war could start again if the wrong word was spoken. Rian felt the weight of that knowledge settle in his chest. She began walking down the ridge, her armor flashing crimson in the early light. Rian followed, each step bringing them closer to the line where the two armies would meet. It was no longer a battlefield, but it was not yet neutral ground. The snow between them was marked with blood, a reminder of the price already paid. When they reached the riverbank, the envoys were already waiting. A Torvian officer stood beside a Karzin captain, their expressions tense. Both turned as she approached, and for a moment no one spoke. Then the Torvian broke the silence. "We have orders to talk," he said. His voice was rough, but it carried no threat. She stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the frozen water. "Then talk to me," she said, "and talk to him." She motioned to Rian. "We are the ones who can give you an end to this war." The captain's eyes narrowed, but he did not argue. The officer's gaze shifted to Rian, searching for any sign of deceit. The conversation that followed was tense, each side trying to claim they still held the advantage. Rian spoke carefully, offering solutions that gave neither side reason to feel defeated. She added promises of shared patrols, supply exchanges, and a neutral zone along the river. Bit by bit, the anger drained from the faces across from them. By the time the sun was high, the first terms had been agreed upon. No one called it peace, but it was close enough to stop the fighting. As the envoys left to deliver the news to their commanders, Rian turned to her. "You've won," he said. She shook her head slightly. "No," she replied. "We've only begun." Her eyes held the same fire as the night they first met, and Rian understood that whatever came next, they would face it together.